Will travel bubbles be the future of holidays? We'll look at what the options are for Singapore. Something for nature lovers, a new and improved stretch of the rail corridor has just reopened. And showing our commitment to water sustainability, the skyline will once again turn blue tonight. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Now, 0 COVID-19 cases were reported in the community today for the 10th day in a row. The 12 new cases confirmed were all imported and placed on stay-home notices on arrival in Singapore. More details will be released later tonight. Well, moving on, a wedding venue, the Orange Ballroom at Tanjong Katong Complex, has been ordered to close for 20 days until April the 10th. It had allowed a wedding couple to host 3 wedding receptions involving around 275 people. If you recall, under COVID-19 regulations, a wedding couple is allowed only one wedding reception with not more than 100 people, including the couple. Police are investigating 46 men and 37 women for allegedly breaking safe distancing measures in 4 separate cases. They had allegedly gathered to socialize with public entertainment and liquor believed to be supplied without a valid license. In one venue, 4 Vietnamese women were arrested for suspected offences under the Employment of Foreign Manpower Act. Well, with vaccination programs underway worldwide, calls to resume international travel are growing. Earlier this month, Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung said bilateral travel corridors for selected vaccinated travellers may well happen in the second half of this year. Well, governments are exploring ways to facilitate international travel. For example, the bubble between Taiwan and Palau, which was announced last week. While Singapore doesn't have a travel bubble with another country just yet, here are our current travel arrangements. Well, there's the Air Travel Pass, which allows all forms of short-term travel, including for leisure. Visitors from selected countries have to take a swab test upon arrival and can go about their activities after they get a negative result. We have several reciprocal green lanes as well for short-term essential business and official travellers. There's also the periodic commuting arrangement between Singapore and Malaysia for longer-term travel for work and business-related travel. Then under the Connected SG scheme, a limited number of business, official and high economic value travellers from all countries will be able to enter for short-term stays of up to 14 days. In addition to regular PCR testing, these travellers have to stay within a bubble at appointed facilities where they can conduct face-to-face meetings with locals. Travellers from countries not listed in the graphic so far have to serve a 14-day quarantine and take a swab test before the end of their quarantine period. We've also been reading about the Taiwan-Palau travel bubble announced last week. There's also a possible Australia-New Zealand bubble, and Singapore is reportedly in talks with Bintan and Batam for a leisure travel bubble as well. So what model can work for Singapore? Well, to take this discussion further, I'm happy to welcome infectious diseases expert Professor Paul Tambaya. He's a senior consultant at National University Hospital, as well as president of the Asia Pacific Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infection. Welcome, Prof. With different bubbles being set up, which is the best model for Singapore to follow, you think?
Yeah, personally, I'm not optimistic about travel bubbles because they depend on the local epidemiology, which can change very quickly. You know what happened in like Thailand and Cambodia, where they had almost no cases and then they suddenly have a lot of cases. Frankly, I think the best approach is what Singapore is doing for the Malaysian cargo drivers. You vaccinate them, and then once 14 days have passed after the second dose, then you allow them in. Currently, they still have a limited itinerary, but this is the potential, and I think this is the future. See, vaccinating in a controlled environment where you're sure you have the quality of the vaccines, and then taking it from there.
Right. Well, I'm under the impression that a safe travel bubble with islands are easier to put in place simply because, they're smaller with less porous borders. But from your expert point of view, is that necessarily the case?
I don't think so because, the reality is with the notable exception of the Ebola outbreak in 2014, 2015, when there was a lot of movement of people across land borders. Most of the travel-related infections are airborne. People go on planes, and the planes don't care whether you're on an island surrounded by water or not. So, in fact, the Zika outbreak, which was 2 pandemics ago, that is thought to have come from some of the islands in the South Pacific and spread to South America. So just because you're an island doesn't mean that you're intrinsically protected. I don't really think so.
Well, for bubbles between two cities, though, are vaccinations a surefire way to kickstart travel again? For example, China has a vaccine passport.
Well, I think so. And the reason why I think so is because it works for other diseases. Like, for example, yellow fever. Yellow fever, if you want to go to Brazil or you want to go to certain parts of Africa, you need to get a yellow fever vaccine. And this actually is very important because the mosquito which spreads yellow fever is the same mosquito which spreads dengue. And dengue is all over Southeast Asia. So if somebody was not vaccinated and they bring back yellow fever to Southeast Asia, it could be devastating. But that hasn't happened. People have been worried about that for 50 years, but it hasn't happened because of an effective vaccine regimen using the international health regulations. So I think the future has got to be vaccine.
Okay, we've been focusing on our residents traveling abroad, but when it comes to welcoming overseas tourists, what are the considerations, Prof? Among other things, do we first have to ensure that the majority of our population is vaccinated?
Well, if we look at it the other way around. If we say that nobody's allowed to come in unless they are vaccinated, then the risk to the local population is not great. But you can't be 100% sure that everyone's vaccine will work. And so what we're doing is actually, I think, pretty sensible. We're vaccinating the high-risk individuals, cabin crew, people who are working in the harbor, people who are more contact with travelers. So these people are already getting vaccinated. The other side of the coin is mandating vaccination for travelers. And I know the WHO has not said that this should be done. And that's partly because not every country has access to vaccine. But, with, like, for example, the Hajj and the Umrah, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia mandates meningococcal vaccine and influenza vaccine. So you can't enter the kingdom without documentation that you have been vaccinated with meningococcal and influenza vaccination. So I think there are precedents, and these are things the airlines are familiar with. So again, like I said, I'm a believer in vaccination for the future.
Well, thanks very much for your insight, Prof. I've been speaking with Professor Paul Tambaya, President of the Asia-Pacific Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infection. In other local news, Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan is in Brunei to reaffirm Singapore's ties with the country. He'll meet with Brunei's Sultan and second foreign minister. MFA didn't elaborate on the purpose of Dr. Balakrishnan's visit, but Indonesian President Joko Widodo last week called for a meeting of Southeast Asian leaders to discuss the crisis in Myanmar. Dr. Balakrishnan will also visit Malaysia and Indonesia after this Brunei trip. Hey, did you notice our city skyline turning into a sea of blue over the weekend? To celebrate World Water Day, a record 44 landmarks and buildings will be lit up in blue tonight as well, the final night of PUB's City Turns Blue initiative. Held annually on March the 22nd, World Water Day is a reminder that water is a critical resource and should be cherished and protected. In Singapore, it's celebrated throughout March, with initiatives that raise awareness of water conservation. Well, after being closed since 2019 for restoration works, a 4-kilometre stretch of the rail corridor has reopened, and this includes the Upper Bukit Timah Truss Bridge. Between Hillview and Bukit Timah, this stretch has new features like additional access points for visitors and restored rail infrastructure. Sounds like quite the picturesque trail for weekend hikes, if I do say so myself. Have a look.
when we got all the feedback, we actually broke it down into, we know that it actually comes from 3 different major groups, which is the heritage, the culture. So they have one particular ambition or the kind of vision they have for the rail corridor. Then we have the nature group, who we also know what they look after for, and also the community themselves, who really, really wants a safe access up to the rail corridor.
Here's a quick look overseas. Myanmar activists are planning fresh protests today, including a call for vehicle convoys to drive through intersections, honking horns and raising 3-finger anti-coup salutes. Media reported dawn protests in at least 2 parts of Yangon. According to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, at least 250 people have been killed since the coup, and the violence has forced many to think up novel ways to protest. Torrential rain is continuing to wreak havoc on New South Wales, forcing school closures and thousands to evacuate their homes. 38 regions have been declared in disaster zones so far, with some hard-hit areas receiving 25 centimeters of rain in 24 hours. 8 million residents were told today to avoid unnecessary travel and work from home if possible. Starting today and lasting 2 weeks, churches in Manila are closed, eating inside restaurants banned, and leisure travel outside the capital curbed as the Philippines battles a COVID-19 resurgence. The number of new cases has exceeded 7,000 for 3 straight days, the highest since the start of the pandemic. Public transport will continue to operate though, and workers allowed to commute. In about 2 weeks, on April the 7th, it'll be a year since Singapore went into the circuit breaker, and your lives may have changed since then through exercise, a new hobby or skill, or maybe you switched jobs or even started your own business. Well, we want to hear your stories, so share it with us by completing this sentence with a word or phrase. Circuit breaker changed my ... You can email a photo or drawing together with a short description of your experience to stshare@sbh.com.sg. The deadline is this Friday, March the 26th, or you can share your photo or video on Instagram with a caption describing how your life has changed in the past year. Remember to tag it with #CircuitBreaker1YearOn. Well, for more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.